Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're about to start our panel for this afternoon. I should just advise that a couple of our panelists are running a bit late, so they'll join us during the course of the discussions. But again, good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Brown. I'm a Foreign Service Officer with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and I come to you from a trade policy background. The objective of this panel discussion is... Oh, you're not hearing me well? Apologize. The objective of this panel discussion is to explore the facets of creative industries and their bearing on the development of policies to create a cohesive, productive economy driven by cultural and creative industries. I would dare say that this is perhaps one of the most important sessions of this three-day conference, as the creation of an enabling policy environment will be a critical step in the development of the creative economy as a unit of economic activity in its own right. It is my hope and indeed my expectation that this discussion will further assist us in identifying and locating the policies and parameters that are necessary, if not critical, to creating the right kind of enabling environment that can catalyze individual creativity, industry, growth and development within this most important sector. Unleashing and harnessing the tremendous untapped social and economic potential which lies dormant within our very vibrant creative industries holds the key to escaping poverty and underdevelopment. In locating our policy thrust, we must revisit the old model of policy development, which largely adheres to a three-pronged approach involving discussions at the international, regional, and state levels, to add to that a fourth estate, or pillar, if you will, that involves better and more participatory approaches, including community-level development and empowerment at the grassroots level. This should take into consideration the relationship between the creative industries and space, locational and geographic space, encompassing the role of and the industry's contribution to towns, cities, and regions within a broader policy debate. This policy thrust should also envision the enunciation of a new stakeholder policy, which formalizes the relationship between government and the owners and creators of culture, and which will drive the development of the creative industry policy. It is therefore imperative that we turn the old paradigm on its head with the stakeholder engagement feeding and directing domestic policy, which provides structure to our regional policies and then shapes our international discourse on the creative industries. This approach, in my view, is the best way that we can truly foster ownership, bottom-up and inclusive growth and development within and across the creative industries. So without further ado, I will introduce our most distinguished panel, which comes to us with a wealth of experience and knowledge. And I will just go through the entire list of their credentials, and then we'll give them an opportunity to speak subsequently. So our first speaker this afternoon will be Mr. John Howkins, who is no stranger to us. He was our keynote speaker yesterday. He's chairman of BOP Consulting London in the UK. He's a global advisor on the development of creative economies and the director of John Howkins and Company in London and Howkins Associates in Shanghai. He was chairman of BOP Consulting, Britain's leading advisory company on culture, creativity, and innovation between 2008 and 2011. The Shanghai government set up the John Howkins Center for the Creative Economy in 2006. Howkins and Associates is currently advising on new projects in Shanghai, Beijing, and Wuxi. I hope I pronounced that properly. He is the founder and director of the Adelphi Charter on Creativity, Innovation, and Intellectual Property, and devised the London Intellectual Property Advisory Service, called Own It. He was associated with HBO Inc. and Time Warner Inc. from 1982 to 1996, with responsibilities for TV business development in the UK and Europe. He has a BA in International Relations and an MA and an AA in Urban Design. He's a visiting professor at City University London and the Shanghai School of Creativity. He's a member of BAFTA, and to our delight, as I mentioned before, was our keynote speaker at yesterday's opening ceremony. Following Mr. Howkins, we will have Mr. Jens Bammel, who is Secretary General of the International Publishers Association, on my second right. Mr. Bammel became Secretary General of the IPA in September 2003. He studied law in Berlin, Geneva, and Heidelberg. Following 2 years of legal training in Germany, France, and Indonesia. He joined the periodical Publishers Association as head of legal affairs and then head of legal and public affairs. In June 1998, Jens Bammel was appointed chief executive of the Publishers Licensing Society Limited, the organization that represents the UK publisher interest in collective reprographic licensing in the UK. Jens Bammel is also married with one child. Next on our panel today will be Dr. Zeljka Kozul-Wright, who is the chief of the Creative Economy program at UNCTAD. And let me first apologize also for the incorrect print of her name in the program. It's not Ms. Kozul-Wright, it's actually Dr. Kozul-Wright. So Dr. Kozul-Wright, as I mentioned, is a Croatian national. She's an economist working at UNCTAD's trade division, where she is involved in the preparation of the UN's Creative Economy report, and most of us should be familiar with that report by now. She holds an MA and a PhD in economics from the University of Cambridge, England. Before joining UNCTAD, she worked at the United Nations Center for Technology in New York and was an assistant professor of economics at the University of Zagreb in Croatia. Over the last 20 years, Dr. Kozul-Wright has been working on the economics of cultural and creative industries in developing countries, in particular, the music industry. She has organized a number of projects on the economic potential of these industries in various countries, including Cuba, Jamaica, and Senegal, etc. She has published articles in the area of copyrights, music and culture, technology and development, as well as transition economies. She has edited a book on the creative industries and developing countries, voice, choice, and economic growth. Our next panelist will be Ms. Christine Norton, who is not here as yet, but she's director of the Kingston and Caribbean cluster. And I should note that Ms. Hema Gurung of UNESCO was listed on the program but will not be presenting, but is in fact in attendance as in her official capacity as program specialist of UNESCO Caribbean Office today. Ms. Norton holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Psychology and Geography from McMaster University, Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, as well as a Master of Science in Law and Science with a specialization in intellectual property and transfer of technology from Queen Mary College of the University of London. She holds the position of Director and Representative for UNESCO Caribbean Cluster Office, which covers 18 Caribbean territories. Prior to her current appointment, she was UNICEF representative in Belize, following a six-year posting as Regional Advisor for UNICEF Latin America and Caribbean Office in Panama City, Panama. Between 2001 and 2004, she held the position of Senior Advisor on Adolescent Development for UNICEF, for UNICEF headquarters in New York City. She describes herself as tremendously committed to Caribbean development and a strong believer in the resilience and creativity of Caribbean people. Our subsequent presenter will be Dr. Deborah Hickling, which should also be no stranger to us. She is currently the chair of the Technical Working Group, the National Cultural and Creative Industries Commission of Jamaica. Dr. Hickling is also the Director of Operations in the Prime Minister's Support Unit at the Office of the Prime Minister. She chairs the Interministerial Cultural and Creative Industries Technical Working Group within the Office of the Prime Minister in support of the National Cultural and Creative Industries Commission, chaired by the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller. Dr. Hickling is also an adjunct lecturer in the Faculty of Business and Management at UTEC. She currently co-authored a proposal with Professors Carolyn Cooper and Hubert Devenish for the establishment of an interdisciplinary center for the creative industries and cultural enterprise, CCICE, at UWI-Mona. Deborah has been an independent Jamaican scriptwriter and producer of radio and television programs. Dr. Hickling is chairman of the Institute of Jamaica's Junior Center, a founding executive member of the Jamaica chapter of Women in Film and Television, and has served on many boards, including the inaugural board of the Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica, and was named deputy chair by Jamaica's Governor General. Deborah Hickling holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Literatures, in English and Communication, and read for her Doctor of Philosophy degree in Cultural Studies at UWI-Mona. Her area of specialization is creative economy policy, development for cultural and creative industries in developing countries. Our final presenter, which will also be joining us a little bit late, will be Ms. Andrea Davis, and she's an international consultant who has worked on International Reggae Day and is a managing director with Jamaica Arts Holdings. She's an IP and brand management consultant specializing in music and the creative industries over the past 25 years in the international Jamaican music industry. She is the managing director of Jamaica Arts Holdings, whose artist roster includes Toots and the Maytals, Janine, Raging Fire, and tonight's special guest performer, Jesse Royal. The company's client and project mix has included Jaipo, Jampro, the Ministry of Tourism, Jamaica 50, Studio One, Marcia Griffiths, Sly and Robbie, Diana King, Morgan Heritage, Luciano, and Bridget Sandals. Ms. Davis holds a BA in Human Relations from the University of Western Ontario and a Masters of Science in Criminology from Florida International University. She has authored several pivotal documents, including Jamaica's entertainment policy, tabled in 2003. Ms. Davis was an advisor on the Creative Economy for Development Program, an initiative of the UNDP's Special Unit for South-South Cooperation. Andrea Davis is the conceptualizer, founder, and producer of the annual International Reggae Day Festival, which is a creative industries celebration and brand marketing platform showcasing the best of creative industries. So after that very lengthy series of introductions, I will now invite our first speaker this afternoon, who is none other than Mr. John Howkins, to give his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I know you heard me already yesterday. I'm not going to repeat what I said then, well, not very much anyway. I'm going to keep my remarks relatively short because then I hope we can have more time for comments, questions, discussion afterwards. I want to start by congratulating WIPO and JIPO, all of them, for holding this event. I go to lots of these events around the world, and I've been struck by the energy in the room. I've met some old friends here, but I've also met people who I hope will become new friends. And I've been struck by their ambition, their energy, their enthusiasm, and the questions that they've been asking. One of the nicest things that one person said to me today was, "John, how can we get you back?" Because I want to come back. I hope I do. But I also sense impatience. I sense people who are frustrated and who have made points often in this room, not for the first time, but they've made them before in other rooms, maybe to the same people, but in other rooms, maybe to different people. I get a sense of impatience. And I understand that completely in two levels, really. One is that creative people are, by nature, highly impatient people. We have an idea, and for us, it's the most important thing in the world. And we want to develop it, push it forward, and we don't want anything to get in the way. So I understand what I would call that sort of creative impatience or artistic impatience. I also am concerned about the impatience for another reason, which is that, as I said yesterday, the creative economy is a very, very competitive economy. And increasingly, a lot of the work that we do, the projects we develop, the ideas, the projects we develop, the businesses we set up, will not just operate within the borders, the territory of Jamaica, but will operate regionally, if not globally. And so we're not just competing against people here, we're competing against people in other countries. And that's another reason why it is so competitive. Things can, in some sectors, scale globally very quickly. And once they've done that, it's very hard to go against them. So there's a sense of sort of national impatience, which again I completely understand. Little example of that, I was trying to buy tickets to go to Trenchtown on Saturday night, and I went on Google, of course, as one always does, and the first Trenchtown that came up, the first Trenchtown festival on Saturday night that came up, and I thought, wow, that's fantastic, I've got it top of the listings, was actually Trenchtown Festival in Atlanta, Georgia. Ah. It was quite hard to use Google to get down to Trenchtown Festival in Trenchtown. So we heard about the biggest reggae festival in the world being now in Japan. And maybe the biggest Trenchtown festival is no longer in Trenchtown. So that's the two little examples of the speed with which this is happening. The topic today is how to put creative economy in the policy agenda. And I'm going to just talk briefly about the UK experience of that. When our culture minister, Chris Smith, as part of Tony Blair's new government in 1997, wanted to give a push to the industries that he was responsible for, which were by and large the artistic, cultural industries, he played the cultural card, but he realized very quickly that that wasn't enough. And that would not get attention from other government departments who had, frankly, got tired of artists asking for more support and more money. And so he relabeled arts and culture, which is his responsibility, as industries. He included in his list some industries that were not part of his responsibility at all. And he stopped playing the cultural card, he played the economics card. My government then, my government now, the prime concern they have is what they call economic activity, which is simply jobs, actually. And they're interested in economic activity because they can tax it. They tax our incomes, they tax trade between companies, value-added tax, and they tax corporate profits. So almost the whole interest of the government then, the government today, not only in the UK but globally, is to increase economic activity. And so Chris Smith realized he had to show that the arts and culture were a substantial economic activity. And he showed that by collecting data on it. He showed it very well. Put all together, the industries added up to a much higher proportion of employment and a much bigger share of GDP than anybody had ever thought before. No one had any idea that this was the scale of what was happening. If you add it all up together, the exports were very significant as well. So he played the economic card. And I think that's the card that I find gets the attentions of governments worldwide. I'm often asked, how do we get the attention of not the Minister of Culture, that's relatively easy, but the Minister of Industry, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Trade, the Minister of Commerce, Minister of Education, Minister of Foreign Affairs. How do we get their attention? And I play the jobs card. I say this is the fastest growing source of new jobs in the world today, particularly with young people. And that begins to get their attention, If that doesn't work, I say the young people who want to work in these industries are the voters of the next generation. And that always gets their interest. So I play the jobs card and the voting card. There are other cards I can play. I can say, you won't get a healthy, happy, convivial society unless you allow people to express themselves. I play that card. I'll play any card I can lay my hands on. And I play them all because I want people to understand this is a very wide scope of what I'm talking about. But the ones that usually get people's attention is economic activity. which translates directly into tax and voters. And I think that is the way to get the creative economy onto any political agenda. As for what then the government should do, well, I did lay out 4 steps yesterday. The first of those was to collect data, which is what Chris Smith did. He did what we call a mapping exercise. He mapped these sectors. It was very difficult. In hindsight, you can pick up the book and you think, well, that was quite easy. But in fact, even in the UK, which is so rich with data, it was very difficult. They had to do 2 editions. The first was really not very good. They hired a very good consultant to do it. They did an okay piece of work. The government had to step in and fill the gaps. They published it. People pointed out lots of errors. So you must do a mapping exercise to collect information on what is happening. And having done it once, you must do it again. In fact, you must update it every year. I only trust data. I have 2 rules for trusting data. One is it done every year, so errors are corrected, and it is updated. And secondly, can you sell it back to the people you got the data from? That's a very rigorous test. But if you look at cinema box office, for instance, they collect the data, they sell it back to the cinemas. TV ratings, they collect the data, they sell it back to the broadcasters. Advertising, newspaper magazine circulation, they collect the data, they sell it back to the publishers. That's a very, very rigorous test. And I like data that passes those 2 tests. Picking up on the presentation about valuation yesterday, one of his main recommendations was to be very clear about who you're collecting the data for. And again, I said yesterday that you can either do the GDP route, which is what governments want,